So my name's Michael Maisey. I'm the author of a book called Young Offender. It was released in July, and I run men's retreats. I run an online program for people overcoming addiction. I'll be 12 years sober in December. I set up a business. I've done lots of positive stuff, but I think the real gold for you guys will be me bringing all of myself to this. All of me is welcome. You know, me feeling a bit fearful, looking at all of you. I don't know all of you, feeling that fear. See Mary up the back there. Yeah, for anyone who's read the book. Has anyone read the book here? Just put up a show of hands. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, there's Mary. If you remember that character Mary, she's at the back of the room there. Yeah. So as Mark said, I experienced a lot of difficulties growing up, and I think it started for me early on. My mum come from a Romany Gypsy background, and she met my dad, who was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and they had a very volatile, violent relationship. And by the age of 1, we'd moved house 4 times on the run from him, and he'd left. And so I was essentially raised by my mum, who was an alcoholic, and it was a difficult upbringing. There wasn't always food available. There was people in and out of our house all the time. And I remember the real moment. I mean, I had some feelings when I remember sort of as a kid knowing my dad wasn't there and there was lots of people in my house, but the real moment where I started detaching from the little boy was when I was about 3 years old. I woke up, and often, as was the case, I'd wake up and there's just adults passed out everywhere. There was no breakfast, and I walked into the into the kitchen to get some breakfast. And I was rummaging through sort of the empty beer cans and the fags on the floor, and I found a tin opener. And as a 3-year-old boy, it was quite fascinating, this thing, you know. I played with it, and I was sitting on the floor, on the cold floor, naked. I didn't have a nappy on, and was just playing with the tin opener. And I was so engrossed in it that I'd wrap the tin opener around my testicles. And I remember as a young boy, I screaming the house down and then passing out and getting taken to hospital. And it was from that moment on, I was on like the watch list. This kid needs to be watched. And that was like a moment where I started thinking, you can't count on those people around you. The people that are meant to look after you often haven't got your back. They're often not there. And then sort of a year later, my mum come from a big Romany Gypsy background, and she had a younger brother called Tommy, who basically got took into care when he was a little boy. And as often is the case in Ireland, I'm sure you know you've heard about it. There was a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse by the nuns and the priests in the Catholic Church. And my uncle Tommy was taken in. He was about 2 years old. That's all he knew all his life. It was just physically and sexually abused all his life. And he came out of the children's home and phoned my mum up and said, you know, I'd love to come to London and try and start a new life. And my mum sort of welcomed him into our home. And I remember the first moment when the abuse started with my uncle was when I was cheeky to my mum. As a kid, I had a lot of I observed how adults interacted. And it was okay to go from 1 to 10 really quickly. And so that's what would happen with my mum. My mum would tell me to do something, I wouldn't agree with it, I'd go from 1 to 10. But now my Uncle Tommy was here, and he wanted to stamp his authority as man of the house. And the way he would discipline me, knowing I carried this injury on my testicles, was to grab my testicles. Like, squeeze them. And that was from the age of sort of 4 or 5 upwards, and there was sexual abuse as well. He'd get drunk, and I always knew he'd listen to a band called the Wolf Tones, and I knew when the Wolf Tones were playing, he was going to come into my bedroom that night. And it was at that time as a young boy at 5 years old, it was like, if the people that are meant to love you do this to you, then what is everyone else out in the world going to do to you? And how are you going to survive? And the only way, and this is me talking about it, looking back in hindsight, the only way I figured out how to survive was to create an adapted version of myself. To create a loud, angry character that kept everyone at arm's length. So if you come to me with aggression, I would meet you with a 10 or a 12. But also, if you come to me with love, if you was a teacher and you wanted to help and support me, that's some of how my Uncle Tommy used to, manipulate me. So I could also hit you with that aggression as well, if you approach me with love. And that was my adapted version of myself all my childhood. And I got to the age of about 14, 15, and I discovered alcohol and drugs. And alcohol and drugs were just like the sort of transportation to get me to be the toughest, meanest, baddest motherfucker out there. I carried all this fear, but I had a good mask on. With the alcohol, it was like I could be this guy. And yeah, I got into crime really young. I got convicted of armed robbery and possession of firearms at the age of 15, which was a big deal back then. There wasn't many 15-year-old armed robbers back then. And shortly after, got sent to prison, come out, got sent back to prison for attempted murder, come out, went back to prison for assault on police, and spent most of my teenage years locked up in a prison cell for 23 hours a day. And yeah, I was just a very angry young man. I looked at people who had a normal life, who had parents who were married and food on the table every night, and I just felt like, you motherfuckers don't know how hard my life is. And that fueled my aggression, and that fueled my reason to be this angry guy and not let anyone in. But eventually, on my last prison sentence, when I come out of prison the second time, I went to go back to crime. And I was like, I'd just given up on getting a job. And I basically said to all my friends, I was like, well, what are we doing to get money? I was like, what are we doing, armed robberies, or what are we doing? And they was like, no, we're selling crack and heroin. It was like the late 90s, everyone was selling crack and heroin. And I was like, great, I'm gonna sell crack and heroin. And I was the worst drug dealer ever. I used to take all my own shit. It was terrible. And then I'd have to go and rob to pay the guy back. So when I went to prison the last time, I was like a fully blown heroin addict, not even knowing I'd become addicted. I was just at it every day, crack, heroin, alcohol. And I got to prison, and me being this tough guy, the prison guards were like, you got two choices, mate. You got a 14-day detox or a 7-day detox. And me being like this sort of tough, young, angry kid, I was like, give me the 7-day, I just want to ride this out. And all I can explain of that is 2 days into it, if you imagine hell on earth, that is what detoxing from heroin with this fast detox is. They've got rid of it now, it doesn't exist now because there were so many suicides. It like flushes the heroin out of your system in a completely unnatural way. And 2 days in, I was like, I can't do this. I cannot fucking do this. And I basically ripped up my bed sheets in my prison cell, ripped them up, created a rope around the bar, and just rolled off the bed. And just hung there until I passed out. And I remember that moment before passing out, it was like thinking about my mum, thinking about Mary. Mary used to send me letters in praying for me, thinking about my mum, thinking about my dad. I'm sorry I couldn't be better than you, Dad. And then getting found, just by the grace of God, the prison guard, it was in the middle of the night, and the night guard, because it's on a detox wing, he has to go around the wing and just open the flap on your door, just check it, you're still alive. And if he had started at the other end of the prison wing, I would have been dead. But he started at my end of the wing. He saw me hanging, he come down, brought me back to life, and I was put in a padded cell. And I remember this moment where the adapted version of myself, this tough guy, had been broken. And my mum come to visit me. They called my mum up and said, you need to come and see your son. And my mum didn't really visit me very often because she was an alcoholic. So prison was like a lonely place for me. And she come to visit me, and normally the visiting room in a prison is where the inmates like to walk out acting tough, like, I'm running this gaff, this prison ain't phasing me, I'm top dog and all this like bullshit. And I walked out like just broke, and all my neck was all like bruised, and I sat down in front of my mum, and my mum said, I've decided I've got a problem with alcohol, and I didn't want to tell you until now, but I'm 3 months sober. And I just burst into tears in this waiting room, which is like the golden rule in young offenders institution. You do not cry. If you cry in young offenders, you just become a victim. You get bullied. And that did happen after that. But it was like the one thing I always wanted in my life was my mum to have one person, just one person I could go to who was there for me. And, you know, there was my mum. And, you know, so I left prison that time, and it started this journey inside my mind of like, what can I do now to change this around? I'm 18, I've spent all my teenage years in prison, I've got no GCSEs. All my mates have done apprenticeships, some of them are on the property ladder, some of them have got their driving cars. I was like, no license, no job, nothing. And so I started on this journey of like, how do I turn this around? And the first thing I'd done was I went to AA. And so I went to my first AA meeting, I was 18 years old. I was like, what a fucking waste of a Friday night sitting in a fucking AA meeting. I was like, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't drink every day, so I'm not an alcoholic. Even though I drink and I do crazy shit and end up in prison, I didn't drink every day. Because in my head, an alcoholic is someone who sleeps on a park bench. I was like, I never slept on a park bench. I never drank every day. I'm not an alcoholic. And I spent from the age of 18 to 25 trying to change, finding it hard, trying to convince myself I didn't have a problem with alcohol. And eventually, age 25, I was like, fuck it, I just can't fucking drink like normal people. So I got sober, and I've been sober ever since. It'll be 12 years in December. And on that journey, I've done lots of stuff. I've done the 12-step program like 4 or 5 times. I've mentored lots of people, done lots of prison talks, run loads of workshops in prisons. I got an award for it in 2014 from the Metropolitan Police, which was quite weird, getting an award from the Met Police. And yeah, that was a funny moment when they just call your name out and say for his contribution for what he's done, and I go up and I look like pretty normal, right? And then at the end they call me over to all the like high up police officers in the circle, and they're like, Michael, tell us a bit more about your life. I'm like, well, yeah, armed robbery at 15, attempted murder 16, and you see all these coppers like looking like, you know, but I don't know, that was a surreal moment for me as well. And yeah, where I'm at today, so I set up a business. I'd also done a Tony Robbins course, and I learned how to set up systems in business. Like everything has a system. Like when something goes really well, let's make a system for it. Then let's make that system idiot-proof. Then let's make it a system to check that system, to monitor that it's being done the way you say it is. And I just done that with my business, and it's won award. It's like won multiple awards. And sort of about 4 years ago, I took a step back from the business. I didn't have to work there anymore. And I was like, what do I want to do in my life? I was like, great, man, I'm just going to fucking kick back. And I got bored so quickly. And then the book come about, and I run workshops in prisons now. I do public speaking like this. I set up a free online program. And yeah, I went back to acting. I'd done acting as a kid. In the middle of all of that stuff, I was in a TV show called Birds of a Feather as a kid, you know, tiny part, but, you know, acting was like my means of escaping who I used to be. And where I'm at today is sort of, you know, helping others, basically. And I guess, like, if I could give you 2 things, really, just off the cuff, that sort of really work for me is all of you is welcome. So a big thing we say on the men's retreat, that you guys who are there, all of you is welcome. So the bit of you that's here, that's listening, that's thinking, this is a load of shit, oh, I can't wait for this guy to finish, that's welcome. The bit of you that's really enjoying it, welcome. The bit of you that's inconsistent at doing the things that make you happy, welcome. Welcome every bit of yourself. And you might be thinking, why? And it's like, oh, hello? Yeah, there we go. You might be thinking why, and because it's in that you're able to get the data about yourself where the gold is. So the gold is always, you know, in the darkest places, and that's why I have a routine of what makes me happy. I know if every day I exercise, meditate, Wim Hof breathing, stretch, I do that, I'm happy. But what I've learned is over doing this for 12 years, that every now and again I just have to stop and do none of it and explore what comes up. Because in the middle of being a human being, not a human doing, you're able to extract the gold that comes up for you. You know, and often for me, I'll do, like what Louis was saying, so I don't have to stop and celebrate. You know, when you think of north, south, east, west, set the goal, work towards the goal, achieve the goal, celebrate the goal. You know, that's the final thing. And often I don't want to stop and celebrate. Why? Because there's a bit of me that still believes I don't fucking deserve it, that's why. I still look in the mirror sometimes and see this little con, this little ex-con. It's like, who the fuck do you think you are? Get back in your place, sit down, stop letting your light shine. And it's like, if I don't stop, and I don't feel that, and I don't welcome that in, that part of me, which I call the security guard, the adapted version of myself, if I pretend he's not there, he'll come out when I least want him to. And it could be in something simple like road rage. Someone cuts me up, would you fuck you, well fuck you? You know, and it's like, that's if I try and suppress him. What I need to do is go, okay, look, thank you. You've got me out of some scrapes in the past, but I'm gonna put you into retirement and I'm gonna take charge from here. But I honor you for keeping me safe for all them years. And so make peace with all of you. Make peace with every part of yourself. Make peace with the part that is inconsistent, that's lazy, that doesn't want to do it, that's intolerant. And the other bit of gold, which how am I doing for time, Mike? Am I waffling on?
This last bit's good.
Okay, yeah. So the other bit, I could give so much gold, but the other bit, which has been a massive masterpiece for me, is relationships. Oh my gosh. Being single, easy. Having a loving, committed relationship with one human being, so hard. Yeah? Especially when you're like me. When I grew up, it was like, the people who hurt me the most were the people that I loved. And now I've got a lovely woman who loves me, who's with her arms open looking for intimacy, and I'm fucking scared shitless. I'm like, oh my God, she's gonna fucking hurt me, just like everyone else. She's got to. Surely she can't be different from the rest. And so I start searching for chinks in her armor. And you know what they say, seek and you shall find? Yeah? And then I find something, there you are. I fucking knew it. I knew it, you motherfucker. And it's like, she's a human being. She's not perfect, none of us are perfect. And the key for that is like, what is intimacy? Into me see, letting you see all of me. Sasha, that's my wife's name. Sasha, I love you. But when you get too close to me, I'm worried you're gonna see how fucked up I am and you're gonna run a mile. And where I default to is I'm gonna reject you first, so at least I've got some fucking control over this situation. Because growing up, I had no control over anything. I didn't even have control over who come in my room at night. And when I said that to her, she was like, oh my God, I just thought you weren't attracted to me anymore. And it's like, no, I'm fucking terrified. And like, it sort of ties in nicely with all of you as welcome. Do you know what I mean? Because if I keep bringing all of me to my relationship and I keep letting her see into me see my deepest fears, we can always get through everything. And you know, it's manifested a lot recently. We've been married a year on the 26th of this month, and we got a daughter as well. And if anyone's married and got kids, you'll know it's like you get into this sort of routine of, you know, sex isn't what it used to be, and you know, you've got kids, you've got businesses and whatnot. And it was like bringing all of me to that. Is that, look, when we met, I fucking had a six-pack and I was ripped. And I don't know if you're that attracted to me anymore. And she's like, oh my God, that's so refreshing, because I fucking feel the same after I've given birth. I find it so hard to lose the weight. And it's like, oh my God, I fucking love you, man. It's like, I remember why I fell in love with this woman. I'm like, fuck, we're both sharing the same fears. And in the middle of that, that's intimacy. Can I bring all of myself to this person who I love? All of my fears, all of my insecurities. So yeah, that's my goal. And yeah, love out loud. That's what I say. Love is the language. If we all spoke more love, it'd be a better place. Thank you.